Yo, guys, it's Kyle coming at you from Bane's Film Reviews. Today, I am sitting down with Austin and Dylan Shell, the writers, directors, directors of photography for Ready Cash, which is a short film that I was lucky enough to watch last week. It's a very difficult film to explain without giving too much away. It kind of plays with the lines between insanity and reality, and um it was really a wild ride, and I had a lot of fun watching it, and can't wait to talk to you guys about it. So again, thanks so much for sitting down with me. What do you guys got going on?
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Yeah, that film is it was an interesting one to jump into for us.
Yeah,
It's a weird one. Yeah.
yeah.
So we were approached about that film by this guy we had never met in person. We kind of just hooked up through Facebook film groups, and
Yeah.
he's a professor somewhere on the East Coast, and he had this really wild idea and a stack of cash to burn on it. And he said,
Yeah.
"Hey guys, like it basically was like a one sentence, like, hey, there's a drug addict. He owes a bunch of money. He finds this cult, and they give him an opportunity to get that money back." And we're like, okay, how are we gonna do this? So we worked with him, and I made a couple different drafts of the script and threw it at him, and we worked through it for a couple months until we finally had what we needed, and we're able to lock it all down. But yeah, it took it took some time to build some nuance into that kind of story because there's some weird details inside of it.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
on our first read through of the synopsis, we almost didn't take the job uh,
Mhm.
because we didn't really see how we could make it a good story to tell.
Yeah.
So we took our time with figuring out how to put nuance in the characters and layered meaning and the things that a good film has. And but yeah, it's like Austin was saying, it took a while to get to that point. A lot of different versions of the script were written.
Yeah. Yeah. So before we get even further into this, I am curious how you guys got into filmmaking in the first place.
That's a yeah, pretty fun little origin story we have. So we were kind of involved in the like punk rock music scene for a while where we were growing up and played in bands and things like that. And
Okay.
one of our friends we played in a band with like 10, 12 years ago, he ended up moving to LA to be a cinematographer, and he just started blowing up and getting these really amazing jobs, music
Nice.
videos and documentaries and commercials. And we had this idea to bring him out to kind of shoot some of our underground cool punk rock stuff. And he said, yeah, that'd be awesome. And I was doing some photography at the time, just like
Mhm.
little photography things every once in a while, so I had a little bit of a working knowledge with cameras, but
Yeah.
not much. And he just took us under his wing while we did these cool interviews and live footage and started mixing and blending and editing things together. He kind of was like, we call him our Mr. Miyagi, because he taught us how
Okay.
to wax on and wax off um, all these different filmmaking techniques. And from there, it just kind of snowballed, and bands kept on asking us to come and shoot their shows. And we were
Nice.
friends with people who ran gyms. So we did a lot of like powerlifting and sports and music. And then just
Yeah.
from there, it went documentaries and music videos, commercials. It only took like 2 years ago until we actually could break into the narrative world of filmmaking, because before that it's just been rudiments and like understanding the functionality of how to make things look good.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like often, I mean, you hear the term filmmaker, and immediately everyone's mind goes to narrative filmmaking. I feel that's such a small part of it. People forget
Right.
about music videos. People forget about commercials. You see this stuff every single day, and I think it's for some reason it escapes us because we try to think of these big things, and I don't think they realize how much time and effort and passion goes into creating these other incredible things as well. Advertisements are not just, filler for a television show. They're a big deal. They're money makers. They're massive. So that's such an interesting way that you got into it, and I like that you guys have transitioned now into this because, like I said, Ready Cash was awesome.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. Of
Yeah,
course.
actually, the funniest thing is that like the money actually is more in the commercial and music video side of it. The people who have solid, day player rates is it's going to be a much higher paycheck than jumping into the filmmaking world because those day rates aren't as big.
Yeah, yeah.
People only do filmmaking for the love of it. They do not do it for the money unless you're way up there in the credits, but
Right, right.
otherwise it's just for the love.
Yeah, and so I had kind of mentioned earlier, you kind of play with the line between what people are going to accept as possible and this really weird reality of things. And I'm curious how you find that balance. You don't go too far as to turn people off to this story, and people go, "Oh, there's no effing way that ever happens. I don't believe any of this." And like at what point do you look at yourselves and go, I don't know, maybe this is too far. Maybe we need to dial it back here. Maybe we didn't go quite far enough. What's that process like of trying to find that balance in something so extreme like this?
Well, we wanted everything to be plausible, like you were saying. So and it goes back to doing draft after draft after draft.
Mm,
And that's the real big advantage of having a team. Like Austin and I, we work really well together, and we're brothers. We've been working together since we were born. So we have, we don't have any hangups. If Austin's like, that idea you had was terrible, he's going to tell me, and he's not going to be afraid that I'm going to get, my feelings hurt or anything. So we have an open dialogue, which really lends to a lot of opportunity because we have two creative minds working on one project instead of just a single thought process with
mm,
maybe not a lot of checks and balances. So when
Yeah.
we
nice.
were coming up with the weirder parts of Ready Cash, we knew that the story was from Justin's perspective, and we
Mm,
wanted the audience to only know what Justin knows. So, and we wanted the audience to basically have the same experience that Justin had. So, when Justin is say on drugs, then the camera movement gets a little more flowy, and
mm,
the lights get a little more vibrant, and things like that. So we really took the time to craft every little aspect and point the audience in the direction that we wanted.
okay.
Yeah, it's the like towing the line between like the nuance and the disturbing was like
Mm,
it was a constant conversation with
yeah.
us too, because our executive producer again, like he was kind of like all for at first. He was like, yo, like let's show as many gross things and all in one time, I'll throw it in their faces. And we're like, okay, that is like there's a place for that. There are audiences for that.
Yeah.
But like the way we want to move through is like really hard hitting in the story aspect and not so
Mm,
much like the gross out factor. So showing like let's just put it out there. If you're gonna show balls on camera, right?
yeah.
You can't show balls from minute 1 to minute 20 every single minute, or else you get desensitized and it doesn't matter, right?
Right.
So if you're showing some sort of horrific imagery that also includes nudity, it has to mean something when it
Yeah.
happens. It has to build up to a part where when that happens, it makes you go, "Whoa, what's
Mm,
happening in this story is something I need to be paying attention to. Something that's it's shocking my perception of what's happening in this story, which means that
mm,
something in this guy's life, this character's life is really powerful in this moment." So we were really big on playing into the nuance of feeling and putting the visuals into the feeling of the character, because that's what we're following in this
yeah, yeah.
story, not just going for one huge gross out.
Yeah. And I feel like the film is very linear in the sense where I feel like every minute it gets a little more intense, and you always know it's coming. And I don't like I knew something was coming. I didn't know what it was, and I don't think that had I sat there and had a thousand guesses, would I've even gotten close to this specific thing. But I like that it's so linear in that sense where you're able to follow it, and every step of the way, it's a little more intense. It's a little more difficult to handle, and I really appreciated that about it because it doesn't you're not over here, and then you're moving all the way over here. You stay in one line, and it's very easy to follow. But again, that shock at the end it's a shock. It's a surprise.
Mm.
It is.
And then so it was interesting. I heard this quote a couple of weeks ago, watching my favorite show, Criminal Minds, just came back on. And they quote Oscar Wilde, or they say it may have been Oscar Wilde. They don't know if it's Oscar Wilde, but he said something along the lines of, everything is about sex except for sex. Sex is about power.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was interesting that I had heard that, just a few days before I watched this film, because I felt like you guys captured that sentiment very well. Sex is in a lot of ways the catalyst for everything that's happening. I mean, obviously, Justin being on drugs is a huge part of his story, but I feel like sex is like the underlying theme throughout the entire thing. How do you go about creating that in a way that's, it's not so obviously about, hardcore sex for 20 minutes. It's kind of woven into the narrative very well, and it's even keeled and never over the top. And I know we talked a lot about, you guys did a lot about, not going over the line and things like that. How does sex play into that, and why does sex play into it the way that it does?
We needed Justin to have the proper motivation to go through with the crazy option that he was given.
Mm-hmm.
And the most motivating thing in most people's life is their sex drive.
Yeah.
That's just how humans work for the most part. So we tried to tie sex and his addiction kind of together, so that one acts as a metaphor to the other one. We wanted the girlfriend Zoe to be, like an analogy for whatever drug he's addicted to. We specifically didn't say what drug it was, because we want people to fill in the gaps with whatever they feel is necessary. The viewer is kind of in charge of that part of the specific details of the narrative. So that's really what it was. We wanted it to feel properly motivated. He had to really have to make a hard decision.
Yeah, and that opening scene with Zoe is, I feel like sex and drugs are two sides of the same coin in that opening scene. They are very much the same thing, and that sets the tone for the rest of it. And I think your comment, Dylan, about everyone is able to kind of relate to the sex drive, its motivation for everyone. I think that's part of the reason that this insane story isn't lost on viewers, because you have that to bridge the gap between the narrative and the viewer. So it was, I feel like people hear, oh, the story's about sex, and they're like, oh, that's like kind of either cheesy or whatever. I think it works very, very well.
Oh, thanks.
Of course, of course. And then you guys have talked a little bit about Light already. Light obviously plays a pivotal role in Justin's story and the overall film. And I think I want to say it's about the halfway mark, but I'm not 100% sure, where everything gets significantly darker. You have that opening scene that's very dark, and you're obviously seeing sex and drugs is at the forefront of the story in that moment. But in the second half, where he meets up with the cult and Tim's character, it gets significantly darker, almost to the point where it's hard to see things. But at the same time, while it's becoming literally more difficult to see what's going on screen, it does a better job of expressing the tones and the themes. And I talk a lot about balance, but how do you find that balance between you're both hindering what the viewer can see and you're strengthening their ability to understand the sentiment behind what's going on?
Yeah,
that comes a lot.
Yeah,
go ahead, Austin.
I was just saying, yeah, it just literally was showing how he's falling deeper and deeper inside of this dark hole.
Yeah. And do you find it challenging to, like I said, like literally be physically separating the viewer from what's happening on screen, because it is so dark, it is so physically dark, and then still being able to connect with them and reach them through the tones and as like by the way of the lighting? Is that like I'm sure it's challenging. There's nothing about filmmaking that's easy, but like what specifically about that is so challenging?
So it's like you're saying, if you get too dark, then you visually lose the details.
Hmm.
But if, like what Austin is saying, if it is dark and the scene is dark, then your viewer is hyper focused on exactly what you want them to be focused on.
Yeah.
You can direct the lighting exactly where you want it to be, and the viewer is basically forced to be focused on this thing.
Hmm.
Now, in our super dark scenes, we wanted the viewer to feel like Justin feels, and Justin is on all kinds of drugs at this point. So we not only made it dark, but we made it blurry. There's a lot of it that's out of focus.
Hmm.
There's a lot of layers of real and unreal. We don't want the viewer to know what's happening and what is a flashback, what he's thinking about. Um, and that really couldn't be done with a lot of bright daylight scenes.
Yeah.
And it just wouldn't feel the same.
Yeah.
Justin's afraid at this point, so most people aren't going to be afraid in a well lit room with smiling faces.
Yeah.
So
If our
that's
perspective is inside of Justin's head, Justin is basically in the dark of what's going on. So he is
Yeah. Yeah.
all over the place. There's a lot of fear happening. He's jumping between these flashbacks of his friend who just got the shit beat out of him, his love interest, the drugs, and then where he's at currently. And all of this stuff is just flashing inside of him, and he's not sure where he is currently until it finally happens, and you see it all drop into the bowl.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Very, very literally. Yeah. Uh,
Yeah.
um, and so I saw a film today. It was called Irreversible.
Gasper,
I
no.
Yes,
Yep.
it's the first time I'd ever seen it. They released an updated version, and I saw it, like I said, for the first time today. And those scenes toward the end of your film remind me very much of the opening sequence of that film, where it's surreal and dizzying, and you're never really able to settle in, and you're forced to try and find one thing to focus on. And you guys do such a good job of making sure that they're focusing on the right thing at the right time. They're not, because you run the risk of, when people are dizzied, just finding something or anything to latch onto. And again, you do such a good job of finding that one thing for viewers to connect with, and it works very, very well.
Thank you. Yeah,
Of
I think a lot
course.
of that is in inserts and details, and not forgetting to get those little specific details that you have to hit while shooting. And a lot of
Yeah.
people don't realize, like, when you're on set that day, 25,000 things can be going wrong at any
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
But as long as you have these reminders, you have somebody next to you, like, to make sure that you're hitting that shot list exactly as you need it to. It's a lot of prep work. So beforehand, you got to know what exactly are you going to need to be able to put in that edit so that it
Hmm.
makes sense in the story later. And we were smart enough to be there at the moment, be like, make sure you're zooming in on this. Not only are you getting this big wide of the entire story that's going on, but
Hmm.
you can zoom in right here for this specific cut so that people know, okay, this is what's the action that's happening, so that we can focus on the linear from A, B to C, you know?
Yeah. And it's interesting that you said that about, zooming in on specific things, because it's a very intimate film. I mean, the story itself is intimate because we're dealing with some pretty heavy emotions and
Yeah.
addiction and sex and things like that. So immediately there's that connection and there's that intimacy that's created. But also there's that physical intimacy where you get a lot of close-up shots on Zach, and you see this in some films where people like to create the intimacy because it allows viewers to connect. But when you don't have a great actor, it doesn't always work, and I see that fail sometimes. I want to be very clear: Zach and Tim were both fantastic.
oh yeah.
So
Absolutely.
yeah, yes.
I'm
I'm
so happy with the cast that we got together. They all knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, yeah. So what is that process like, of knowing you had the right people? I mean, I know there's a whole process to making sure that you had that right person, but that you can catch them in a close up like that and catch the emotion exactly the way it should be every time. And then, what are the greatest challenges that come with that?
I mean, conveying to your actor exactly what they're supposed to be feeling and why,
Hmm.
and having your actor be able to translate that is, that's one of the hardest things about directing.
Yeah.
And we went about, addressing this problem by doing so many table reads before. We met, we did Zoom calls with the cast and read throughs, one-on-one conversations with everyone, just making sure that we hit home over and over and over and over and over the exact tone for their character, and even sometimes like in that specific scene. So the cast, they knew exactly what we needed. So during shoot day, Austin and I didn't have to do a ton of directing. I mean,
Yeah.
there was, but not like we didn't have to like pull them off to the side and we're like, hey, this time you're supposed to be a little more afraid and like,
Yeah.
this, that, and the other. We didn't have to do a whole lot of that because we'd done it all before we started shooting.
Yeah.
Hmm.
They already knew the broad strokes. We might give them a little, like a little hint, like, hey, like throw your brow a little more, or like
Yeah.
pull your chin up or something like that. So
We also were really big into collaboration with our characters and our actors. So while we were like portraying the tone and everything to them, while we were doing these table reads and having these one-on-one conversations, there'd be a lot of back and forth. They'd say, like, what about it? What if they were something like this? Or like, what if they come from a background like this, but we don't have to say it. Like, that's just how my actor, like how I envision my character being like this. And we're
Hmm.
like, if that ends up like this, that sounds perfect to us. Like we just work it out all together, even for the tiniest roles. Like we didn't even have a conversation with Zach's or Justin's mother like until
Okay.
like 3 or 4 versions. I've made like 10 versions of the script, but like the middle version of it, I was like, you know what, there needs to be a conversation here that gets a little deeper. And Tracy, who the actor of the mother, she like already had all this stuff in her head, and she was like working it out with us. She's like, why would we get here from there and this and this and this? And we're like, all right, well, let's talk it out. Let's see how an addict, the mother of an addict, is a big issue, right? Like I've worked with some people on addiction and things like that, and you can see family, like they love you, your family is going to be there for you, but there's only so much that they can give you before you learn on your own. Like you got to hit rock bottom at some point. You can't just completely just bottom out everybody around you. So
Right.
we talked to her as she is a mother, and she understands that. She's like, I'm always going to be there for my kid, but there's a point where I have to say like enough is enough. And like I think that was a good conversation to have, because it gave Justin no other avenues to take. He had to go the route of the cult. He couldn't go to his mother, couldn't go to his friends. He couldn't sell the bag, like upgrade it to premium shit. He couldn't do any of that stuff.
Yeah.
So he had to make that call to the cult. And I think that was really important. And these are conversations we had with the actors to really start developing all the characters. And I think having a collaborative process helps directors and the actors bridge that story gap. It makes it so much better. Some directors aren't like that. Some directors are like, this is my story, 100%. You shut up and do your job. But from what we've done so far, it's been very much like, hey, this is a team effort, and we're gonna help. We're gonna steer the ship, but we want everybody to be a part of building this story out. And I think that's what made this really fun and really cool experience.
Yeah. One of the things that I found in common with a lot of the people that I've been fortunate enough to talk to, is that they try to collaborate with everyone rather than just saying, this is the way, this is my vision, and this is the way I want it to happen. Figure out how to make that happen.
Right.
Like you can't just you're not a dictator, you're a director. And so it's nice to hear that again. And I'd heard numerous times from different people that Tim is just a pleasure to work with, and he's just you know a an ocean of knowledge when it comes to film and things like that.
Yeah. Tim
So
is
I imagine,
great.
I imagine he was incredibly helpful. Um, but then also you mentioned the mother, and her finally having to accept that, well, Justin's going to hit rock bottom and there's nothing I can do for him. And it's absolutely true. Former coworker of mine, her parents kind of had to experience the same thing where they said, we're here, but she's on her own now.
Yeah.
And I think again that helps to bridge the gap between what's happening in the film and someone who might not really be used to something like that because it feels very real. Um, so yeah, you do all these little things that feel subtle, but they're so important in the grand scheme of the film.
Yeah, right. I mean,
Yeah.
we've had multiple people. I don't want to say names, but there's multiple people involved in the production that have had issues with addiction in the past, and
Mm,
they were so generous at like explaining just kind of the depth and the darkness surrounding it all,
yeah.
and it was just it was really helpful because like it was just really helpful for us to be able to put that in the script, even if it is a very subtle way and throwing it into the nuance of it all. But just understanding how deep and dark someone has to make their life before they make such a crazy bonkers decision
Yeah.
to try to get out of it, you know.
Yeah. 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 And I'm not quite sure that people watching this that haven't seen the film yet are comprehending. I don't think they're able to comprehend, quite how crazy the thing is
No.
at the end.
Yeah.
So I am excited to have other people watch and hear their thoughts and uh, hear what they have to say, and if it resonated with them the same way that it did with me. So where can everyone watch this?
So it's not going to be available as a short. The executive producer wants to put it in an anthology.
Okay.
Other films of a similar theme,
Okay.
and release that as its own feature length film.
Okay.
Um, Release date is still very up in the air right now,
Okay.
but
Yeah, we'll keep you pens, but yeah,
Yeah.
since we're not the main owners of the film, it's going to be hard for us to give you any sort of straight answers on that.
Sure. No, that's fine. And but whenever you do figure it out,
Yeah.
please let me know so I can pass it on.
Yeah, were you able to watch the behind the scenes stuff?
I was not yet. I didn't get a
Okay,
chance to watch that yet, but I definitely will. I definitely will check this out.
cool.
And then what are you guys working on at this point?
a lot.
Funny that you actually mentioned Oscar Wilde. We are currently working with the same executive producer. We're creating a modern like R-rated thriller adaptation of Oscar Wilde's play Salome, which is
Okay.
a late, it's kind of a not a very well-known story, but it's a late 1800s play that Oscar Wilde wrote about King Herod and John the Baptist. John the Baptist was roaming around King Herod's land, and he was spouting all these prophecies, and King Herod did not like that at all, so he jailed um, he jailed John the Baptist. So he had recently taken the throne from his brother and stolen his wife, along with her daughter, who is
Okay.
Salome. Years down the line, Salome hates King Herod, and she does whatever she can to kind of get back at him.
Hmm.
She goes to John the Baptist, tries to seduce him. He turns her down, and she does whatever she can to piss off King Herod by um, doing a big series of very radical things. So it's going to be a really fun feature that we're filming in a month or two, and we're going
Nice.
to be shooting in Louisville. So it'll be really fun.
It's
Very,
another
very
one
cool.
that's very over the top and pretty
Yeah.
crazy. But I
It-
guess that's our thing now.
yeah, that it kind of sounds like that might be your thing. What attracts you to those kinds of films?
I don't know. I mean, yeah, there was cash behind it. That one way to help. But it is interesting just to get our creative wheels turning. Instead of just a typical drama or
Yeah.
something, we were able to like dig deep into some, because this one's really big into like people losing their sanity. So like there's a lot of characters who are like slowly slipping out of saneness, and we get to show that visually, and I think that's going to be really, really fun. And we're kind of in our minds, we're kind of mixing like the Matrix and Game of Thrones, so we're going to have a lot of like strong color palettes and like crazy lighting, and
Okay.
we're still using Oscar Wilde's original script as well. So they're going to have very classical theater dialogue while we use these crazy, crazy visuals in an industrial, gritty, like nightclub environment. So
So cool.
yeah, it's
Well,
going to give us a lot of opportunities to do something weird with it.
Nice. Well, I'm looking forward to it. Best of luck on that, and please let me know when that's available. I'll. I didn't post this review yet, but obviously, if you haven't figured it out, it is a great review. So I'd love to review anything else you guys do.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Of course, I'll try to get it out either today or tomorrow. I just have to edit. Um, my wife was editing everything, and I relieved her of her duties because she has so much on her plate already. It wasn't fair to make her edit everything that I wrote because I write an exorbitant amount.
That's fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah. But then, so the last question I have for you guys: what are some of your favorite films?
Oh man, that answer changes at least weekly, if not
Yeah.
daily. Just depends on what mood I'm in. I'd say well, Indiana Jones,
I literally was thinking that the other day too. I was like, man, this movie's solid.
Raiders specifically.
Yeah. I'm really a big fan of Denis Villeneuve's work, mostly because I guess we can talk a lot about subtlety and nuance, and like
Mm,
he's like the king of tone right now. Like he's really good at making that long like malaise in the shots and making you just kind of get cerebral with it all.
yeah.
So I've really liked his film Prisoners. Kind of like, I don't know why, like if you just explained it to somebody, it seems like not most people's cup of tea, but it is such a good drama film with really wild psychological issues in it, and I think it's something that's really fun to watch.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also Sicario and
Mm,
Blade Runner and Dune, those are fantastic films. But yeah, a lot of things he's been doing lately. Um, uh, David Fincher, I like David Fincher stuff. Yeah.
okay. I know it's a tough question.
It's
I
so
love
It
tough.
really is. It really
A
is.
top 5 film of every genre, and it changes
Yeah.
every 2 weeks. Yeah.
Yeah, I had I think I asked the question the first time and I was like, yeah, this is okay. Like I like asked the question. And my wife was like, no, I love seeing people's reaction when you catch them off guard. So I keep asking, I love it. It's my favorite question now.
It
Because
is such a solid. I mean,
I,
God, yeah, now I just want to keep on saying
yeah,
random like
that's
Ridley
right.
Scott, like we can just say like, yeah, Blade
Alien.
Runner, Alien, like
Yeah. Yeah, I'm making a list now of what everyone says so that I can catch up because I refer to myself as the worst film critic ever because I haven't seen all of these fantastic films, these mainstream films that I probably should have.
yeah, that should be like another segment you do. You just do like a watch through and you write about them.
Yeah, that's not a terrible idea. That's a good idea.
We'll come
But
over. We'll bring popcorn.
heck yeah. Well, if you're ever I don't know where you guys are actually located.
We're a Dayton area.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm in like central Jersey area.
Oh, New Jersey. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Drive.
Yeah. But if you're ever out this way, hit me up. You have my number.
Okay. You got it.
But again, Dylan and Austin, thank you so much for sitting down with me and spending some time to talk about your film. And like you said, it's in the process of coming out for everyone else to see, and I'm excited for that. And I'm excited to be able to share that with everyone and bring some attention to it because it deserves it.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate you giving it a watch. It's big and important to us, and we're on this come up of doing as many films as possible right now, and then I think it's going to be an interesting ride to see what happens in the next couple of years. So
Very nice.
at the start of it with us.
Of course, best of luck and everything going forward, and you guys have a great day.
You too. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Bye, guys.